The year 1930 saw the consolidation of studio systems, where the major film studios had tight control over the production, distribution, and exhibition of films. The Big Five studios, MGM, Paramount, Warner Brothers, RKO, and 20th Century Fox, and with the help of the Little Three, Universal, Columbia, and United Artists, dominated Hollywood. They employed a stable of contract stars, directors, and writers, ensuring a steady flow of movies to theaters in which they often owned. The introduction of sound also brought changes to acting styles, and screenwriting, as well as dialogue and vocal performances, became crucial. Despite the economic challenges posed by the Great Depression, Hollywood managed to continue to thrive by providing escapism through genres like musicals, comedies, and dramas, cementing its role as a dominating force in global entertainment. The year is 1930, and Will and I are in a new decade, man. We are off to the races. We're going to give you guys a lot of things in this episode. We're going to talk about the state of American society with the Great Depression and what that's doing to people. We're going to talk about our movies that we're going to be drafting. Will's got his slate, his movies that he's going to be bringing to the table. I'll have mine, and then ultimately we will draft them. Will, excitement level for the year 1930.
Yeah, so there's at least two films here, right, that I'm pretty excited about. One, I think that we'll probably both have on our list is pretty obvious for anyone paying attention. This is a big one. It's been remade a bunch of times. It'll be fun to watch this. I think kind of as the original one that was put down. So, and then there's a couple other ones that be interested to see what you have on your list. And there's one that I'm really excited to talk about. I don't know if we'll end up picking it or not once we get there, but I think this will be a fun year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm always curious to see like where you're going to take me with some of these picks, right? So when I'm looking on my list and I'm looking, so like just kind of tell you and the viewers a little bit about my process is I'll start off with a Google search, best movies of the year 1930. It usually sends me box office, or it usually sends me, a meta score or a Rotten Tomatoes thing, right? But I try to compare those lists that I get. I'll open up 3 or 4 different ones. I'll get on Letterboxd. I'll go by their rating. And I just want to see, is there any repeats? Because if there's repeats, then there's kind of a clear, the audience is telling us, look, these are the ones you should be watching. But every now and then, we're trying to get to a full flush, kind of filmography or catalog of movies from 1930, Will. You might have 3 that are clear, but then the other 3 is like, all right, what's Will going to pick here? Like, what's his palette? What does he think we should do? And I'll be honest with you. One of my choices is just simply based on the fact that we were a little stuffy in 1929, even though it was great movies. It was a little stuffy. So I thought, maybe we should go this route. I don't know if we'll ultimately draft it, but it's going to be nominated today. So there's a lot of things that kind of go into it. I don't know if you want to share your process a little bit on how you choose your movies.
Pretty much the same. I think I take watchability maybe a little bit more into account than you do, which is,
Can we watch it?
Yeah, and I think we're going to start getting out of that a little bit so that, once, in probably 5 years, it's not even going to be an issue anymore. But I'm still kind of worried about that. The movie I was kind of saying, I'm not sure if we'll end up picking is one of those ones where it's on YouTube only. So that might kind of sway our opinion. I don't know yet. But I look up to see what's popular. I like going to the Academy website to kind of check out and see what the best picture nominees were, what's kind of repeat on, like, is there an actress? Is there an actor? Like, what's down list a little bit, like is it keep popping up? So I like to keep that in mind too. So
no, and I think that's great. And I think some of the other things that is interesting is I'm going to read some of them off right here, is talking about specific actors, film debuts from this year, people that made their on-screen debut. We're going to get some of them, with the guy, whether or not we draft the films or not.
Sure.
They have arrived, and I'll give you some of those names right now. Film debut, Humphrey Bogart, his first movie, Up the River. We get James Cagney. If you guys don't know who James Cagney is, he's won an Oscar. I forget for one of those. I forget what the movie was, but it was one of those gangster films from that time. Bing Crosby for The King of Jazz makes his debut. We roll down the list here a little bit more. We're going to get names such as Laurence Olivier makes his debut, The Temporary Window. Ginger Rogers, she makes her debut on The Young Man of Manhattan. So just, a lot of names. People are starting to kind of show up a little bit more, and I think Humphrey Bogart being the kind of the biggest one that jumps off the page there.
Sure.
We're getting into a decade that I think is going to present us with some of the best films in the history of filmmaking. I'm very excited. It might not be 1930, it might not be 1931, but by the time we hit the middle years and latter parts of this decade, it's going to be interesting to see where we kind of compare them as we continue to rank our movies going forward. So,
yeah, no, that's for sure. One of the movies I've got listed here has got Gary Cooper on it. So there's a lot of big names, a lot of names coming over that kind of set the tone for the next 70, 80, 90 years. So.
And another thing that's interesting is we talk about people making their film debuts. We're talking about people making their debuts, Will, like into this world. Clint Eastwood was born in the year 1930. How cool is that? American actor, director, and producer. So, I just think it's interesting. You get Gina Rowlands. George Murdoch was born this year. Both those have passed. But, yeah, you're talking, what is that? 96? Would that be 96 years? 94. Yeah. 94 years, right?
94 years. Yep. So, we're talking about a long time ago, right? And it's really just interesting too, because I think you were saying some of the best movies of all time are in this decade. So I'm excited to kind of, the whole mission statement of this project is we want to learn more about the history of film because we love it so much. And I think we're really going to start getting into that, like how the threads, we're going to start seeing the traces through history as we start moving through here. So.
Yeah. And another thing too is, for me, I'm more of give me a great performance, right? A lot of times people hate on, biopics because they're hard to do, I kind of tend to like those. I remember The Aviator when you follow Howard Hughes. I remember watching Leonardo DiCaprio and J. Edgar Hoover. It's like, yes, the movie as a whole, they need some work, right? But the performance is the thing that gets you through it, So I'm kind of curious as we've touted that the 1930s, these movies tend to be some of the better ones come from this decade. Do the performances match, or did the storytelling get better? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's interesting is we're into almost full talkie mode now, right? There's still some silent films that are going to be, kind of on the periphery, but we're getting into that full talkie mode. So I think we're going to see some performances might start this year, but maybe not all the way there yet. Where the mediums, they're figuring it out, right? And they're going to start finding their footing. The foundations are being built right now. So, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is. And it doesn't get more exciting than, ladies and gentlemen, Betty Boop makes her on-screen debut this year. So just to let people know. I want to ask you a question here. I'm going to say something, then I'm going to ask you a question. So we have kind of talked about the Great Depression is still the thing that is, we've hit the launching point in 1929 with the stock market crashing. Now we're in the midst of this thing. Now this thing, I know we're still in the early days because it takes about a decade plus. You could almost argue 15 years after we get out of World War II that really get us back to a place where we're thriving in a financial way. So I'm going to ask this kind of question. So how did the Great Depression of the 1930s redefine the American dream, reshape societal attitudes towards wealth, success, and the role of government? That's one thing. But here's the question. How did artists and writers of the 1930s respond to the existential angst and social upheaval of the Great Depression through their creative work, right? So especially you
Yep.
take that and you add on top of it, studios have kind of taken over the game now, right? And they've reinvented the way movies are made. They're getting done in these studio lots. They're getting done in these big warehouse rooms instead of, they've been done that way for a while, but not necessarily to the grand scale that the studios are bringing in 1930. So I guess my
Yep.
question just becomes like, how are artists and writers responding to this? You think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a wave of social movement during this decade, right? I mean, FDR comes in, and the New Deal uh, gets made pretty soon after he gets elected in I want to say 32, but there's a clear distrust of power in this decade. There's a clear distrust of moneyed interests, right? And I think that's reflected by the artists of the time. I mean, one of the best writers in the 1930s is John Steinbeck, and I mean, he's writing, you know, uh, now I'm blanking on it, of Mice and Men. He's writing, Grapes of Wrath. He's writing these stories that, have to do with the average person and what they're going through during this time. And, I don't think we'll see it in this year and maybe not even next, but over the decade, I'm sure we're going to start seeing films that kind of reflect on the American experience and how, the 20s were a lot of fun, but what does this decade look like? And I think we're going to probably get into some more dark territory. I know the gangster film is going to start taking off here over the course of the decade. So I think it's probably going to be a little darker than maybe the movies from the 20s. So
Yeah, well, it's interesting when you talk about like we have the privilege of hindsight of looking at the hindsight of this, now what 200 and 300 years? How old's our country? 1776. So we're,
yeah,
we're 200 and some years,
yeah, 260 or whatever the
something like
math
that.
is.
Yeah, yeah. So it's still relatively a young country in the scope of the world in its existence,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
we have the privilege of hindsight to kind of see that these things have peaks and valleys. And what's interesting is you talked about there's a huge distrust in the government now, and in the way, first of all, just getting people banks to be able give your money to strangers, they'll hold on to it. That whole concept took a lot of marketing, right? That was a huge marketing scandal just to get or way just to get people to do that. I mean, you're thinking, you want me to give my money to you, and then all of a sudden it's going to be there when I come back. Like that's something too, right? Invest this money in here, and you'll get more coming back your way. So you have to have people that have success stories from that in order to trust it, and then they get there, and then it fails, and now you've got this great distrust. Even though the country, not till World War II, in the end of World War II, do we start getting back to a place of thriving? Is that where we're at? Is it just because the country's successful? Where do you think we get to a place where people start trusting the government again?
Hmm.
Is it around JFK? And then do we quickly, because of Vietnam, do we quickly lose distrust in people again, like into the government again? Because I think we get peaks and valleys, right? And now it feels like we've got great distrust, and not just the government, but just like in human beings making the right decisions anymore. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm just curious, like, what's the rebound rate of these? Do you think we're worsened now? The rebound rate is worsened. It's not. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
I know what you mean.
Compared to that time frame, are we talking 20 years and we're going to get back to a place where we've got a peak, or are we going to ride this wave for a while? Then to now, kind of give me both perspectives.
Yeah, it's hard to say because the world is so different now than it was in 1930. I mean, things just happen slower. I think it was harder to know exactly what was going on every second of the day, right? I mean, we all have notifications on our phone. If somebody if somebody in power does something dumb, like I get six notifications. So it's a little bit different world. So I mean, ex there's we learn and we get information exponentially now. Like things are just so rapid that it's hard to say like it's going to take 20 years for there to be a turnaround in our trust for government. there might never be. I don't want to be like super dark on our movie podcast, but like it's just the world is so different now. It's hard to really kind of frame them as the same. Like it's really hard to compare them because I really do think there's some apple and oranges stuff going on. But really, I mean, it's at the end of the 50s when all of a sudden, moneyed interests start to kind of take back chunks of the pie that they had lost over the last 20 years. I mean, that's when you start seeing tax rates fall, and that's when you start seeing, corporations start to become, accumulate more and more. So it's this period is a period of great growth, and I mean it is spurred on by World War II, and I'm fascinated by this time period because there's just a lot of different factors going on, and so I'm rambling a little bit, but World War II is really, really important because it unifies us, right? It puts us back into a group that we're all kind of in a pot together, rather than being segmented. So, it's helped by this period in the 30s where you have, uh, what are they called? Social, trust like nets, so that you can't fall too far if you do fail. So,
Yeah, and I just getting back to kind of like the film element to it,
mhm.
you have these, and one of the things we're going to talk about when we start doing our draft is these studios now are, not all of them, but some of them are finding ways to make bigger budget films, right? They're spending a lot more money on these things because they're finding ways to cut costs and be more efficient in some areas, right? But the cost overall of making these movies are still continuing to climb. We're going to talk about a movie specifically when I nominated that didn't make its money back, but yet was still celebrated, right, by the critics and celebrated by the people that went and attended it. That um,
Yeah.
that these movies continue to get made at that scale. So it just is interesting though that you have a lot more money being put into these films, and this dichotomy of the people that go and watch these films.
Mm.
They don't seem to have the money now to attend these types of escapisms as you have it. So I'd be
Yeah.
curious to, and I haven't done the research, and maybe you have, but like to see what the attendance is like throughout the course of the 1930s. Is it still a cheap enough luxury that people can afford,
Yeah.
or is it something that goes back to the elite and
Mm.
you kind of lose, and film becomes, and movie going becomes classism again?
Yeah. Well, I mean, another important thing about the Great Depression is it's not, it is a U.S. problem. It's a world problem. I mean, it wasn't just the U.S. that's going through this, but it's also a little bit regional, too, because, I mean, you've got one of the kind of spurring events here is the drought that the, Midwest and the Dust Bowl are going through, right?
Oh yeah.
So that's a really important factor. It drives people to the coasts. You start to lose some of those smaller towns that popped up over the last 100 years, whether they're mining or, whatever those small towns popped up for, farming. You lose a lot of that. A lot of people go to the coast. So, I mean, there's a lot lost here, but, I think it's still relatively, as far as movies are concerned, there's still that extra scratch that people can throw together to kind of get over and escape.
Yeah, and I just did a quick Google just because I was curious. So, according to Digital History, even at the Depression depths, 60 to 80 million Americans attended the movies each week. In the face
Wow.
of doubt, despair, films help sustain national morale. And then, especially during these early days too, you get a lot of propaganda gets thrown in here too, especially during this time frame, right? Yeah, 60 to 80 million Americans attended the movies each week, Will.
Yeah. Well, that's every month now. It's not as many people go to the movies, that's for sure.
Yeah. God, I can't even imagine how many movie theaters must have been on your block, right? During a
Yeah.
time frame like this. I mean, because the real estate, you couldn't have had that much real estate. So there must have been, just 4 or 5 theaters going around. So interesting
Yeah.
to talk about. anything that you wanted to add to the 1930 discussion before we move on to talking about our movies and what we want to present?
The only thing we didn't really talk about is color. Be interesting to see, like, as we when we start to see that kind of become a little bit more prevalent. I mean, it might not be until the end of the decade, but still, I mean, that's a really important feature that is, obviously important now. So interested to kind of see when that starts to pop up.
Yeah, so I think during our research there was one movie that was on here that I can't remember if I don't think I wrote it down, um, but it's got its use of two. I forget what they call it, like dual color or something like that. We start seeing people go back and add these things in.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I just wonder, like we've seen a lot of soundtracks be messed with. I
Yeah.
wonder if we're going to have issues with some of these films that we can't get the black and white original, that they're going to be dubbed over in color. I hope that's not the case,
Yeah.
because I really want to get to a point that when we do see a movie in color, will like it's so blatantly obvious, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of what that will feel like, because that's kind of the reason why we're doing these things in chronological order, is we're trying to experience the technologies as they're thrown to us. So um,
Yeah.
yeah, so interesting. Yeah, color will be a big one. And again, we talked about this in the last one. We're still getting a lot of firsts. We're still going to get those firsts, not just for United States and Hollywood and the way they do things, but a lot of countries are still, they're playing catch up to what the Hollywood studio systems are doing. And I think it's great too that the Hollywood studio systems were always kind of had their ear and their eye on what everybody else is doing. So if there's anything that they needed to kind of steal, or they needed to know because it was revolutionizing the industry, they would go over there and do that. So that's, again, being in a place of privilege, that kind of helps you keep things like Hollywood going.
Yeah.
So um, with that being said, should we get to our presenting our movies?
All right. I'm ready if you are.
I think the first one that I'm just going to throw it out there now. When I was going through these process, I was told you all the things that I do. This one just jumped off the page right away. I'm sure you have it on your list. You've already noted that it's been remade a few times. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure we're talking the same movie. I've
Yeah.
actually seen this original movie when I took my film class when I was in school. Now, with that being
Show
said,
off.
Will, yeah, I had a. This was a great class. This is one that you would have loved. It was the class was early film or early literature. It was American literature and early film. I don't know. It was like they were taking these two things and they were combining them. It was
Oh,
really,
okay.
really, it was awesome. So that movie being said is All Quiet on the Western Front. Do you have this one on your list?
Oh yeah, it's number one. They remade it a couple years ago. It had some Oscar buzz. It ended up winning a couple things. I forgot to look that up, but yeah, I thought that was really good. People get into this, like they call it war porn sometimes, and I take a little bit of issue with that because one, I think it's a real thing, this idea of war porn, but like when something's trying to tackle something serious, when someone's trying to tell a story about the the pain of war, we should take it seriously. And I think this is one of the first ones where you really get that idea kind of driven into us. So
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that this movie was made by a Russian born American,
mm,
okay, born in Russia, eventually works his way as an American filmmaker, okay, Louis Milestone. Um,
mhm.
and yet it tells the story of German soldiers from their perspective, right?
Yeah,
We get this German narration. And so just an interesting, you get this, there's three different countries there, and
yeah,
that all have huge influence, right? Um,
yeah,
so just an interesting anecdote to that. All Quiet on the Western Front. It came out in April 21st, 1930. I think, Will, it's safe to say, since we both have this as our number one movie on the list, we can already move it to the draft board. Is that fair?
yeah. I think it would be negligent if we didn't watch this one.
Totally agree. Give me
Yeah.
your give me your next pick that you would like to talk about and put on the board.
Okay, for sure. But real quick,
Sure.
fast note. Lewis Milestone also, thought this was fascinating. He directed the Ocean's 11, the original, which is one of those movies that maybe we'll watch when we get to it. But the Rat Pack. So it's
Yeah,
just an
dude.
interesting
Yeah.
kind of interesting. I've said dichotomy three times already in this, but it is because you've got this movie, which is a movie about war and death and what it does to us, and then you have the Rat Pack. So just interesting, interesting that he did both of those. But I think with
Hey,
my
time out
second,
real quick. Time
oh
out.
sure,
At least we didn't get the Rat Pack in All Quiet on the Western Front,
it would be
right?
very quiet, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Uh,
Shoot me,
Break the,
baby. Shoot me, baby. Yeah. Anyways,
oh
that was
man,
my
I didn't know
that
we
was,
were going there.
that was my Sammy Hagar.
It was great, all time performance, Rob.
Yeah.
Um,
Thanks.
so I'm torn here, right? Because there's a couple movies on my list that I feel like we belong here, and then there's a couple movies that maybe don't, but I want to watch them anyway. Um,
Well, remember, we're not drafting yet unless we think it's obvious like that one. So just
oh,
make your
yeah,
presentation, and then we're putting them on the table and we'll draft them at the end.
yeah. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna go with Just Imagine. It's a science fiction film that's directed by David Butler, and it's a movie about 1980s New York, and it is about technology, and it's about telling a story about the folks that are what we think is 1980s New York is going to look like. And I just thought it looked really interesting. Sci-fi is one of my my go-to's when I want to watch something that maybe isn't going to be very good, but I want to see what the ideas are anyway. So I'm going to put that one on the board.
Say it again. What was the name of it one more time?
It's called Just Imagine. This is the one that's available on YouTube, though. I couldn't find it anywhere else. So,
This is
um,
interesting. 50 years later, you're trying to predict 50 years into the future and what that would be like.
mhm,
I think that's interesting just to look at just from the aspect of like, 1984. That movie was, you know, that book came out in 50s, right? In the
mhm,
50s. And there's
right,
a lot of accurate things, right? Not just then, but today still. Uh, it'd be interesting to something to look at. So just imagine Will has put it on the board. We've already drafted All Quiet on the Western Front. I'm going to kind of tell you some of the things that I have thought of for this decade or for this year. Um, I kind of want to get into some of the things that maybe the movies aren't touted to be all that great, but I feel like because we're gonna start getting better movies, if I ever wanted to get a glimpse of what it was like with certain, famous characters or famous actors, these might be, or famous directors, in the early days, these might be the times to do that, even though there isn't necessarily a place for them in the six. So we'll find out. But one of the movies I'm talking about is called Animal Crackers, and it's a comedy musical following the Marx Brothers.
mhm,
Groucho Marx, Harpo Marx. These guys were a big part of American filmmaking. These guys are a big part of American societies, and they brought comedic relief during a time where people definitely needed it. I don't think we've done a comedy or a movie of this scale. I guess
mhm,
you could call maybe the Broadway Melody, maybe Harry Beaumont's type of films, but to me, something that's like straight in your face, a comedy. I don't think we've even done one outside of maybe the circus, right? So
right,
I'm presenting the Marx Brothers in their movie Animal Crackers. Again, this is in a lot of people's top tens from this year, so it's not like it's a bad movie. Its
sure.
meta score holds up. Its a Rotten Tomato score holds up, so that it still could be. I just where are you at with the Marx Brothers? Have you heard of them before I mentioned them? I mean,
Yeah,
they're
so
part
I've
they're part of
definitely,
Americana.
yeah, for sure. I definitely have heard of them. I couldn't tell you, back in the day, I know my dad was he would watch old black and white comedies sometimes, like just randomly. I was pretty familiar with the Three Stooges. So it's possible I saw something, but wouldn't remember. So this is actually on my list too.
Oh,
I,
interesting.
I threw it on as like I only, I didn't have a ton on here that I was 100% on. Um, I think it would be interesting to kind of catch this because it does have a very good score. It does seem to have held up well. So yeah, no, I'd be fine with throwing this one on the list too.
You want to draft it, or you want to just see where we go?
We're looking at 6 or 7. I can't.
Well,
I'm
let's
Yeah.
let's
Let's
put
do
it
it.
on there. We'll put it on there if we both agree. I mean, it really should. That's the compelling argument right there.
Okay.
Um, all right, present your next film, friend.
All right. So my next film is called The Divorcee, directed by Robert Leonard. It's a movie about when a woman discovers that her husband has been unfaithful to her, she decides to respond to the infidelities in kind. It sounds like
Ooh.
Norma Shearer won Best Actress this year for this performance. You know, I'm interested to see exactly what this entails. It's got decent ratings as well, but I'm always kind of fascinated when you tell a love story that's not quite a love story. So I think this one just looks interesting. So
How do you spell it? Is it you said divorcee? How do you spell
yes,
that?
so it's divorce with the extra e.
Okay, I thought so. Uh, in 1930, I just want to get the release date.
Sure.
Yep. Okay, I see it here. So she won the. You're saying she won the best actress for this year.
Yes.
Interesting. So side note, we didn't mention it. I know you mentioned that it won some awards. You weren't sure. All Quiet on the Western Front won the Best Academy Award for
Right.
Best Picture. So we've got that taken care of. You know, the only movie that we haven't seen on that front, Will, is Wings, and that's because we weren't doing movies yet. So other than that, we've seen the Broadway Melody, and then we'll have watched All Quiet on the Western Front. Yeah, Norma Shearer, The Divorcee. This is an all talking picture. And I don't know much about Norma Shearer. This is not a name that I'm familiar with. So I would be interested in putting this. We'll see. We'll see where it falls. But I would be. You got me intrigued with this one.
Yeah. She. I know she went on to play Maria Antoinette in a movie in about I think in the 30s. It might have been early 40s. But it seems like she had a career after this too. So just be interesting if it's a really great performance to see where we go with her.
Yeah. Man, I didn't even see that one on the list. Where did you find that one at? Was it like a deep hit on Letterboxd?
Actually, no. This was because I was looking at 19. I went to 1931 because this is still in that period of the Academy Awards where some of the movies it was split. Right, it wasn't all 1929 films were in 1930 Academy Awards or 30 in the 31. Right, so it's in I believe it's in 31 where she won in 1931. So that's how I found it.
Okay. 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 I've got it written down.
All right.
Next movie I have on my list, Will, just curious if you've seen it on yours at all. But I'm going to throw you a name of a director. Again, I'm doing this more for your benefit, I think, than mine. I have not seen this movie, but I did see this man's most famous piece of work. Okay. Again, going back to some of my film classes. And this director, F.W. Murnau, directed a movie called Nosferatu in 1922. And
Hmm.
have you heard of that movie?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that movie has been made over a couple times, and again, that is a horror genre. This man um, uh, knows that genre very well. But what I like about F.W. Murnau is you talked about Light earlier with Carl Theodor Dreyer and the way Passion of Joan of Arc told a story. That's kind of how F.W. Murnau is looked and talked about through from his peers. Is he is a director who plays with shadows and plays with story or with lighting in the same
Yeah.
capacity in which Carl Theodor Dreyer did. I'm introducing a movie called City Girl.
Hmm.
Okay, and this is directed again by F.W. Murnau, but I do think that there's a place for this movie on our list on IMDb. It was the number 9 best movie. It's got a 7.7 out of 10 stars. It's about a Chicago waitress falls in love with a Minnesota farmer and decides to face a life in the country. Doesn't sound as compelling as the Divorcee movie, but when you break down, I went to Letterboxd for this, and right away I'm seeing 5 stars. I'm seeing 4 stars. I'm seeing 5 stars. And what they talk about is the imagery that's used in this movie. I think this is one that could be worth watching.
Yeah, no, I pulled it up on Letterboxd here. The tagline seems very interesting. A waitress from Chicago falls in love with a man from a rural Minnesota town. So you've got that, two different lives or two different lifestyles, two different areas, kind of coming together. So I'm I don't have a ton else on my list. So far so good. I wouldn't mind throwing this one on there.
Okay. Well, I've got a couple more on mine. If let's kind of go through them, and then we'll add it if we feel it needs the place. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll give you the last one I have on my list. Excuse me. Mostly because you stole my animal crackers from me. I thought I was gonna be able to throw that one out there, but the last one I have on my list is a movie called Morocco. This movie is the movie I mentioned when I brought up Gary Cooper.
Gary Cooper. Yep.
Yep. And it looks like Foreign Legion marches into Africa. I'm assuming this town is in Morocco, and falls in love with somebody. So this is something that we kind of see over. I mean, Casablanca has kind of got the same kind of feel. I mean, Lawrence of Arabia, the guy's wearing it's the same outfit on on the poster. So I'm interested to see if this movie is any good. It's got decent ratings. I am also curious, this time period. I'm always kind of curious, like what kind of racial implications are kind of underneath, if there's any issues that pop up. So, yeah, this one was intriguing to me.
Yeah, so this one didn't quite make my list, but it was right there, right? Only because I went like 4 or 5 deep, and I'm like, man, Morocco feels like it fits in what we're trying to do here. So, Marlene Dietrich is kind of been paired with Joseph von Sternberg, the guy that directed this movie. He's kind of famous for like them being 1 and 2. They constantly are working together throughout the studio system in the 1930s. So when you get a pairing that keeps repeating itself, there's some type of magic there. It says here that Marlene Dietrich was nominated for Academy Award for Best Actress for this one, and it must be that she lost out to Norma Shear for the Divorcee. So there's going to be performances that are worth talking about if the Academy Awards is worth their bread and butter. So,
Sure.
And then we get to experience a Gary Cooper film there. So I would be okay with throwing this one on the list. It does have that Lawrence of Arabia feel. It does have that kind of, in the 1930s, when you talk about like Gone with the Wind, Will, and movies like that, they had these like big epic journey movies that take place over months at a time. And I think this might be one of them.
Yeah, no, it definitely seems like it. No, I mean it's another romance. This is going to be our romance here. It looks like there's at least a couple other ones on here that that we've mentioned that just interesting. There's 3 different films that we've mentioned so far that have some sort of romantic implications. So
sure. Okay, I want to throw one on there that has some romance to it. For sure, but also has a big epic production value to it as well. 6th best film from 1930 according to IMDb, and the 3rd best film according to I believe. Oh, I lost it. I'm not sure what it was, but it was 3rd best film. That's Hell's Angels, and this is directed by Howard Hughes, the infamous Howard Hughes, the gentleman that had his foot in a lot of different ventures. This would be almost like if Elon Musk today decided that he was going to direct movies, Will. And I mean that from the sense of like somebody who has his hands in a lot of different places, right? Not necessarily the same guy. But this is who Leonardo DiCaprio portrays in the movie The Aviator. So for those of you that have seen that, but this is brothers Monty and Ray leave Oxford to join the Royal Flying Corps. Ray loves Helen. Helen enjoys an affair with Monty. Before they leave on their mission over Germany, they find her in still another man's arms. So that's the tagline. But the thing that people take away from this movie is that it didn't make as much as it spent. According to, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it just barely made over what it spent. But this has got huge airplane sequences. It'd be interesting to see how he shot these and what the production value and how much his obsession with, germs and things of that nature, did it translate over to his obsession with filmmaking? Was he just OCD in every aspect of his life? So,
God, yeah. No, this movie is, I think, portrayed in the Aviator, right? I mean, there's the whole
it is.
scene.
It's a big part of it, yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be interesting.
Other than that, I all I have is honorable mentions. Okay. That's where I'm at. So here's what I would be willing to do right now. Okay, I think it's safe to put on All Quiet on the Western Front, Animal Crackers, Morocco. I'm really intrigued by this Divorcee. I want to see how Norma Shear does that. And then the other ones we can talk about.
All right. Yeah, no, I saw Hell's Angels. I didn't go to it though because I honestly didn't realize that it was Howard Hughes. So if I had, I'd probably have had it on my list too. I feel like that's the next one that we should probably watch. I feel like that's probably the next one I would argue for. Is Hell's Angels.
The reason I would argue for that one as well, because I think I'm with you, is this is where we get introduced to Jean Harlow, and Jean Harlow plays a big part in the 1930s. She becomes a lead actress, one of those. I think she's portrayed by in the movie by, oh gosh, her name is it's Kate. Oh my gosh, she's a great actor. No, oh yeah, Kate Blanchett. Yeah, she's portrayed by Kate Blanchett in that movie. So Jean Harlow is a big piece of Americana and early day first ladies of the screen. She's up there with the Greta Garbos and some of the others that we haven't talked about. But so I think it's interesting to kind of get Gary Cooper. We're getting Jean Harlow. We're getting Howard Hughes. We're getting this great war epic. And this is, that would be my only argument against it, is that it is a war film, and we already had this big epic war film. But I think there's a place for it.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be interesting to see both of them against each other, right? Because just to see like if they're using different techniques, or if one is a little bit weaker in certain areas than the other. It'd be interesting to watch them both, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. The only other two that we have on our list that we haven't drafted is City Girl by F.W. Murnau and Just Imagine. And I have my three on here, so I'm going to leave it up to you, buddy. I've got All Quiet on the Western Front, which I know you did as well, and we both had Animal Crackers, but I have Hell's Angels on here, and you've got Divorcee and Morocco. So
okay. Well, man, I feel like Just Imagine is the one that I would pick, and it end up being like Noah's Ark, right? Where good ideas, but doesn't necessarily hit the spots that I was hoping for. I'm intrigued by this City Girl. I think when Letterboxd has something highly rated, I get my hopes up. So I think this is the one that I think this is where we should go, is City Girl. With Just Imagine, I feel like we'd probably get to the end of it and be like, hey, that was kind of fun, but maybe doesn't fit 1930 the way we want it to. So I think we go City Girl here.
Well, I'm excited to hear you say that, only because I just looked it up. This is F.W. Murnau's second to last film that he ever made. So I feel like if we don't catch him now, we won't. Sure. And I'm just curious myself as to, is this film going to live up to the Nosferatu? Clearly not on the same scale, because Nosferatu is a masterpiece and a classic and all those things for those that have seen it. But what is his directing style? Is he just a one-off? Is he known just for that, or is he somebody that because he's a big name during that time? This is like a Hitchcock. This is like a Kubrick. This is a big name in the world of filmmaking from that time. So I'm glad that we're gonna catch him before, because he actually passes away a year after this. So
Gotcha.
So, all right, that means our six movies, and I did not catch all the release dates, so I'm not going to be able to get them in order, but our six movies are All Quiet on the Western Front, Animal Crackers, Morocco, The Divorcee, Hell's Angels, and City Girl. And for those of you that are listening, if you guys follow us on Instagram and whatnot, we will release these in order according to the release date. We're not going to bore you with all that now, but we did it again, Will. We just drafted.
Yeah. All right. Very fun. I'm just so curious that we've got the 2 war movies, and then we've got 3 romances, and then we got the 1 laugher. So I wonder what, when we figure out what order we're going, that'll, hopefully we don't watch all 3 of the romances back to back. Maybe get a little bored, but.
Well, is it fair to say that The Divorcee might not? I mean, again, it's a romance, but hopefully we're trying to give credibility to the Academy Awards here, right? That intrigued us. We're like, oh, she won the best performance that year. It's like, okay, yeah. Is this like In Old Arizona, which was nominated for Best Picture? You know, you lose your credibility there, or you know what I mean? Where are we at with this? So I'm hoping that we start building some credibility within the Academy.
Yeah. For sure. No, that would be great, because they haven't had a great track record so far.
Not so far, yeah. Other than that, I don't have too much more to add, other than, you know, again, we keep drafting 6. We don't have to. You know, if we don't feel like some of these are up to the snuff, we don't have to. But it seems to be the theme in which we're doing right now. So,
yeah, no. I think 6 is a good idea for now. I'm sure we're going to get to a couple years here where 6 may be not enough, but I think for now, I think 6 is working out okay. I feel like last year we did okay with our 6, and I don't want to start stretching into that territory where we're just mad at ourselves for going to 7.
Well, no, I was actually talking the opposite way. I was saying if I had to choose 4 films, I would say All Quiet on Western Front, Animal Crackers. I would pick Hell's Angels, and I would probably go The Divorcee. If I had to pick 4, like I would say Morocco and City Girl could probably, you know, be watched on a when we do this round 2 journey of ours 20 years from now. So, but let's stick with 6. Let's see how we do. If we keep hitting. You know, I think right now we're still hitting a pretty good batting average. So we're having more movies that are good than not. And if we can keep on that route, then 6 is the number we should be doing.
All right.
So
I thought you wanted to stretch this out into 8.
No. I'm not there yet. We're going to get there well enough. But I will say this, because we have some war epics, these movies are going to get a little longer.
Yep.
I've already looked at the run times for the 2 war epics. We're over 2 hours on both those. So, Will, final thoughts?
Moving into the 1930s, man. We've done 3 years. I'm proud of us. We've been sticking to it. I hope people are enjoying what we're doing, even if we're learning on the way here. But I'm just glad we're doing this, man. That's all.
Hey, me too. And I got to tell you how good it feels to be in a new decade. Like, you know what I mean? It feels like now it feels like we're on our way. You know what I mean? Where the 20s, like when you're stuck in 29 and 27 is where you started and you're like, oh, are we going to do this? You know, but I got to tell you, there is no slowdown in my want to. So if you're still long for it, I am. So.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Let's keep doing this.
Awesome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you guys stick around with us as well. I firmly believe we're going to pick up more and more people as we get, closer and closer, decade in, decade out. So